Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thanks for being here. Now we turn to our Torah reading and our chant before that. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, udvar Adonai merushalayim. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, udvar Adonai merushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah le'ama Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Yai la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 yai la 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 ya la 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 ya la di da dum ba la la di da dum ya da 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 ya da di da dum ya di da 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 dum ya di da 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 di da dum ya di da dum ba ya da di da dum. Baruch Adonai Hamavorah. Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Bachar Banu Im Kol Ha'amim, Ve'natan Lanu Et Torato Bruchat Yashechina Notenet HaTorah. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you. So we turn, as I mentioned in the email, for those of you who received it, this week we'll be reading actually this week's Parsha and next week's Parsha, Emor and Behar, because I wanted to, because next week's Parsha is so great, and it felt like a shame to not be engaging in conversation with it together. And I don't know, there's also a lot in this week's Parsha too to unpack and discuss, so we'll see how far we get, and then I'll do my video next week for some more thoughts and reflections on next week's Parsha. So Emor, the one we're going to start with, contains some challenging precepts on who is worthy of making sacrifices. And so a trigger warning about this Parsha, it talks a lot about the fact that people with certain disabilities, defects, aren't worthy of being priests. And in fact, animals that have defects or blemishes also aren't worthy of being sacrificed. So we're going to dig into this problematic text and think about how do we engage with and read these offensive verses today, and what do we do with that? The text also talks about desecrating the holy name of the divine. We really often understand that to be not swearing in the name of God. But I think there's a lot more to unpack with that, and so we'll explore that together. And then Behar is filled with these visionary, radical commandments, including a sabbatical year for the land, the Jubilee, the redistribution of wealth, and a reminder to trust in abundance. And powerfully, it talks about the fact that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh tells us the land is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's, and we are but mere resident sojourners on the land with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So we're going to explore that. And together, they provide us with guidelines and ideals for how we are to treat the stranger and the needy, a continuation from Kedoshim of how we are to be holy and what our connection is to the land. So we're going to jump in and we'll do what we do, which is you'll start reading, I'll interrupt with some thoughts and questions, and we'll go into breakout room at some point, and we'll see where we go. So if somebody would be willing to unmute and read the English.
The text size okay?
The size is fine with me, but I'm on a really big screen, so somebody who's going to read who probably doesn't have a big screen in front of them. But if others think it's big enough, please, somebody can just unmute and read the English for us.
Okay. Hirevave said to Moses, speak to the priest, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, none shall defile himself for any dead person among his kin, except for the relatives of the closest to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, and his brother. Also for a virgin sister, close to him because she has not become someone's wife. For her he may defile himself. But he shall not defile himself as a kinsman by marriage, and so profane himself. They shall not shave smooth any part of their head, or cut the side growths of their beards, or make gashes in their flesh. They shall be holy to their God, to Hirivave, and not profound the name of their God. For they offer Hirivave's offering by fire, the food of their God, and so must be holy. They shall not make inside their household as their wife a woman defiled by harlotry, nor shall they take one divorced from her husband, for they are holy to their God. And you must treat them as holy, since they offer the food of your God. They shall be holy to you, for I, Hirvevave, whose sanctity you am holy. When the daughter of the priest defiles herself through harlotry, it is her father whom she defiles. She shall be put to the fire. The priest who is exalted above his fellow, on whose head the anointed oils has been poured, and who has been ordained to wear the vestment, shall not bare his head or rend his vestments. He shall not go in where there is any dead body. He shall not defile himself, even for his father or mother. He shall not go outside the sanctity and profound sanctuary of his God. For upon him is the distinction of the anointed oil of his God, mine Hirvevaves. He may take into his household and his wife only a woman who is a virgin, a widow or a divorced woman, or one who is degraded by harlotry, such as may not take. Only a virgin of his own kin may he take his wife. That is, that he may not profound his offspring among his kin. For I, Hirvevave, have sanctified him. Hirvevave spoke further to Moses. Speak to Aaron and say, no man of your offspring through the ages who has a defect shall be qualified to offer this food of his God. No one, no one at all who has a defect shall be qualified. No person who is blind or lamed or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or a broken arm, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, well, let's just say small person, or who has a growth of his eyes, or who has a boiled scar, or scurvy, or crushed testes. No man among the offspring of Aaron, the priest of the defect, shall be qualified to offer Hirvevave's offering by fire. Having a defect, he shall not be qualified to offer the food of his God. He may eat of the food of his holy God, of the most holy as well as the holy. But he shall not enter behind the curtains or come near the altar, for he has defects. He shall not be profane these places sacred to me, for I, Hirivave, have sanctified them. Thus Moses spoke to Aaron and his sons and to all of the Israelites.
Okay, we're going to pause there
Yeah.
for a moment because that was a lot of really difficult, painful stuff. Right. So let's back up for a minute. Let's take a deep breath. This is the challenge of our Torah, right? And I think we can turn off the screen for stop sharing for a moment, Austin. Thank you. So I've spoken about this before, which is that when the text presents problematic aspects, like this was just filled, right, with really disgusting stuff, right? We have a choice. We can reconcile it and try to make sense of it and justify it, although it was written at a particular time of history and so on and so forth. Or we can use it to show the limitations and shortcomings of who wrote the text at the time and our own shortcomings in our own time. And that's the way I choose to look at Torah, because it's written by human beings. And these texts are written by human beings who have a prejudicial view of women and of people who don't have perfect bodies. And so certain bodies are marked as inferior. And I really want to uplift the book of, I'm just going to grab it because I was looking at it last night. Sorry, I even tightened my screen and that didn't help. So it's called Loving Our Own Bodies, and it's by Julia Watts Belser. And it's an amazing book. And so she really grapples with, she's a woman, disability rights activist who lives in a wheelchair. And so she grapples with these texts. So some of what I'm sharing here today comes from her book, because it's really quite brilliant. She doesn't address the explicitly address in her book. She's the way this part of this parsha talks about women and women's bodies, but we can talk about the fact that all these bodies are deemed not worthy. And right in the text itself, right, it talks about honor killing of women. If a woman is harlotry or isn't a virgin, then she's defamed her father, and she shall be put to death. So, we have we tend to project a lot of this stuff on others, and yet within our own tradition and text, we have a lot of very problematic concepts and ideas. And I want to say that I don't believe that this text, thank you, Austin, for putting that in the chat. Austin put a link to the book in the chat, so if you want to grab the book, if you want to get the book, you can grab that link. I don't think that this text where it says, God says, only people who are perfect bodies can offer sacrifices, or only, or that women defame their fathers and therefore they should be put to death. I don't think that's actually God speaking. That's human beings speaking, and what they're doing in that is they're projecting onto God their own prejudices, their own limitations, their own worldview, not the other way around. And we'll hear a different voice of God or of people in this parsha also, and in the next parsha. I guess the sacrifices, the word for sacrifice is kerev, which really means to draw close, to come into connection with. And so this text is saying only some certain people are worthy of coming into connection with God, but we know that's not true. All of us have moments where we feel connected with and can access God. God is everywhere, and we all can access it. There is no hierarchical access to God. So I just want to ask, like, when you think about the word defect, which is what one of the translations of the word that's being used, mum is the Hebrew, mem, vav, mem. What comes up for you when you think of the word defect?
Different.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with the way that we don't talk about translation and original meaning of words and in their context, in their historical context. So nowhere did I hear anything or read anything that these people were considered inferior. And I question what defects actually meant in the way they were written, and in the context. So I know this is our modern interpretation of it, but I'm a little wary of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. other thoughts, reflections?
I think of defect as imperfect, but only God is perfect. So that's all the rest of us, which is a dilemma.
Right, right. Yeah, Neil, please.
Yes, I think that you're correct that this is how it is filtered through a particular human being at a particular historical moment. And well, it's painful, but so that these things were written within one or a few generations following the liberation from Egyptian slavery. So you have multi-generational traumatic uh, themes going into it as such. It's not pleasant to say, but obviously, in enslaved people, there's no boundaries in terms of violation of sexuality. So, unfortunately, as a result of that, the sense of feeling de-emasculated for the next couple of generations, there's almost an obsessiveness on, quote, the sexual purity of the women in the tribe and the desire to have control over them based on what had happened previously. But that clearly does not make it uh, channeling the voice of God or having anything to do with a deep sense of spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, Andre.
When I hear the word defect, I think of things, not people. A mechanical defect, something in a car or something. But for some reason, it just doesn't. In fact, when I see or observe people that this reading may have considered defective, I'm always amazed at how well they're doing. If I see someone on the street with a cane, we seem to have a lot around here. I'm just amazed at how well they're negotiating their world and that they have the energy and happiness to get out in the world. So I just don't connect defect with people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. So Rashi, one of the great teachers that we appreciate and honor and learn from, asks, why don't we bring a blemished animal? And to explore this question, then he turns to Malachi, one of the prophets. And the prophet says, Malachi says, that should not a son honor his father and a slave a master? God is both father and master, but receives no honor from the people. So how do we know that God receives no honor from the people? They receive no honor from the people. The example that Rashi relies on is because they bring a blind, lame, or sick animal as a sacrifice and says it does not matter. So the sacrifice we're supposed to offer to God is supposed to be, like a perfect animal, right? And so then Rashi asks, who would offer such to a human official? Who would offer a defect or a blemished animal to a human official? Would not the master or the father consider that an insult? So what Rashi's arguing here is that it's an insult somehow to the divine for a blemished priest to approach the altar. So I hear you, Jacqueline, that in the time, it was written at a particular time, and that's true, and it's been interpreted in ways that have resulted in exclusion of people, insults of people, and I know that for a lot of, this woman speaks about for herself, hearing this parsha and other parshas like this, where people that are different bodied, don't have perfect bodies the way we assess perfectness in this world, have felt really have really had to grapple with this text and found it really problematic because they see themselves in the text and see themselves as less than. And so that's why I'm asking these questions, to ask ourselves. Andre, I appreciate that, when you think of a defect, you see it as an object. And yet if we think of a defect in an object, it's something that's broken, something that's less than whole. And so people with disabilities experience this text a lot as a reflection of, or a teaching that they are somehow less than whole. And I don't see it that way. And obviously you don't see it that way. And I don't think many of us see it that way. And yet the world does create a world in which it is often seen that way. And people often experience it that way. And so I just wanted to uplift her understanding of this, because I think it's a lens that is worthy of exploring, even if you don't think it's in alignment with the way it was intended at the time. The way it was intended at the time and the way it's mobilized and used and understood over the course of history is also relevant to our discussion. So, any other thoughts? Or we can keep going.
Yeah, I would. I agree with what you said, Kat. I would just add that it seems to establish too, or maybe just identify with, some concept of perfection. So this is not perfect, this is perfect, and this kind of binary is very problematic, I think, and it's certainly alive and well in the neoliberal world that we live in. So
Yeah.
that's really a huge issue for me. And also the proximity of the text to these imperfections in the body with sex workers, women, harlots, zonot, as it is in Hebrew. So
Right.
that is also problematic, obviously.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for naming the harlot, quote unquote, as a sex worker. Yeah. Gives it more respect than we normally give it in these texts. So thank you for that. Okay, so does somebody else want to pick up here on chapter 22?
I will give it a try.
Great.
Instruct Aaron and his sons to be scrupulous about the sacred donations that the Israelite people consecrate to me, lest they profane my holy name, mine, Yud He Vavs. Yud He Vav Yuds. Say to them throughout the ages, if any man among your offspring, while in a state of impurity, partakes of any sacred donation that the Israelite people may consecrate on Yud He Vav, hey, that person shall be cut off from before me. I am Yud He Vav He. No man of Aaron's offspring who has an eruption or a discharge shall eat of the sacred donations until he is pure. If one touches anything made impure by a corpse, or if a man has an emission of semen, or if a man touches any swarming thing by which he is made impure, or any human being by whom he is made impure, whatever his impurity, the person who touches such shall be impure until evening, and shall not eat of the sacred donations unless he has washed his body in water. As soon as the sun sets, he shall be pure, and afterward he may eat of the sacred donations, for they are his food. He shall not eat anything that died or was torn by beasts, thereby becoming impure. I am Yud He Vav He. They shall keep my charge, lest they incur guilt thereby and die for it, having committed profanation. I, Yud He Vav He, consecrate them. No lay person shall eat of the sacred donations. No bound or hired laborer of a priest shall eat of the sacred donations. But a person who is a priest's property by purchase may eat of them, and those that are born into his household may eat of his food. If a priest's daughter becomes a layman's wife, she may not eat of the sacred gifts. But if the priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and without offspring and is back in her father's house as in her youth, she may eat of her father's food. No lay person may eat of it, but if any such party eats of a sacred donation unwittingly, the priest shall be paid for the sacred donation, adding 1/5 of its value. But the priests must not allow the Israelites to profane the sacred donations that they set aside for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or to incur guilt requiring a penalty payment by eating such sacred donations. For it is I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who make them sacred. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, and to all the Israelite people, and say to them, when any person of the house of Israel or of the strangers in Israel presents a burnt offering as the offering for any of the votive or any of the free will offsprings that they offer to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, it must to be acceptable in your favor be a male without blemish from cattle or sheep or goats. You shall not offer any that has a defect, for it will not be accepted in your favor. And when any party offers from the herd or the flock a sacrifice of well-being to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for an explicit vow or as a free will offering, it must, to be acceptable, be without blemish. There must be no defect in it. Certainly bring this home, don't we? Anything blind or injured or maimed or with a wen, boil scar or scurvy, such you shall not offer to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not put any of them on the altar as offerings by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You may, however, present as a free will offering an ox or a sheep with a limb extended or contracted, but it will not be accepted for a vow. You shall not offer to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh anything with its testes bruised or crushed or torn or cut. You shall have no such practices in your own land. Nor shall you accept such animals from a foreigner for offering as food for your God, for they are mutilated, they have a defect, they shall not be accepted in your favor. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, when an ox or a sheep or a goat is born, it shall stay 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on it shall be acceptable as an offering by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. However, no animal from the herd or from the flock shall be slaughtered on the same day with its young. When you sacrifice a thanksgiving offering to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, sacrifice it so that it may be acceptable in your favor. It shall be eaten on the same day. You shall not leave any of it until morning. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall faithfully observe my commandments. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not profane my holy name, and that I may be sacrificed in the midst of the Israelite people. I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who sacrifice you. I who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, these are my fixed times, the fixed times of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, which you shall proclaim as sacred occasions. On
I'm just going to jump in here for 1 second and just say
Yeah.
these are the various festivals now. There's Shabbat, you'll see going through it, but keep reading. I just wanted to set that up.
I don't recall the author of the, of Yud Hey Vav Hey ever being so like self-centered. Yud Hey Vav Hey, saying it so many times kind of neurotically, but never mind, I'll go on. On 6 days work, on 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. It shall be a Sabbath of Yud Hey Vav Hey throughout your settlements. These are the set times of Yud Hey Vav Hey, the sacred occasions which you shall celebrate each at its appointed time. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, there shall be a Passover offering to Yud Hey Vav Hey. And on the 15th day of the month, Yud Hey Vav Hey's Feast of Unleavened Bread, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day, you shall celebrate a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. 7 days you shall make offerings by fire to Yud Hey Vav Hey. The 7th day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. Yud Hey Vav Hey spoke to Moses.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second. So there's Shabbat. I'm just going to lay this out for folks because this is where the festivals come from. I mean, there's other places in the Torah, but this is one of the places. So there's Shabbat that was just spoken about, and now this was Passover. So Passover, the first day is a holiday. You're not supposed to work. And the 7th day, the last day of Passover, is also a holiday. You're not supposed to work. And then in between, you eat the unleavened bread. So go ahead. Thank you.
Yud Hey Vav Hey spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving to you, and you reap its harvest, you shall bring the first sheaf of your harvest to the priest. He shall elevate the sheaf before Yud Hey Vav Hey for acceptance in your behalf. The priest shall elevate it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day that you elevate the sheaf, you shall offer a burnt offering to Yud Hey Vav Hey, a lamb of the first year without blemish. The meal offering with it shall be 2/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Yud Hey Vav Hey, and the libation with it shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. Until that very day you have brought the offering of your God, you shall eat no bread or parched grain or fresh ears. It is a law for all time throughout the ages in all your settlements. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of new grain to Yud Hey Vav Hey. You shall bring from your settlements 2 loaves of bread as an elevation offering. Each shall be made of 2/10 of a measure of choice flour, baked after leavening as first fruits to Yud Hey Vav Hey. With the bread, you shall present as burnt offering to Yud Hey Vav Hey 7 yearling lambs without blemish, 1 bull of the herd, and 2 rams with their meal offerings and libations, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Yud Hey Vav Hey. You shall also offer 1 he-goat as a sin offering and 2 yearling lambs as a sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall elevate the 2 lambs, together with the bread of first fruits as an elevation offering before Yud Hey Vav Hey. They shall be holy to Yud Hey Vav Hey for the priest. On the same day, you shall hold a celebration. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall not work at your occupations. This is a law for all time in all your settlements throughout the ages. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor, the stranger. I, Yud Hey Vav Hey, am your God. Yud Hey Vav Hey spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall observe complete rest, a sacred occasion, commemorated with loud blasts. You shall not work at your occupations, and you shall bring an offering by fire to Yud Hey Vav Hey." Yud Hey Vav Hey spoke
That's Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
That's Rosh Hashanah. And now we're getting to
Yeah.
Yom Kippur.
Yeah, Day of
Go
Atonement.
ahead.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses saying, mark the 10th day of the 7th month. Mark the 10th day of this 7th month. Of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. Strange sentence. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall practice self-denial, and you shall bring an offering by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall do no work throughout that day, for it is a day of atonement on which expiation is made on your behalf before your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Indeed, any person who does not practice self-denial throughout that day shall be cut off from kin. And whoever does not work throughout the day, whoever does any work throughout the day, I will cause that person to perish from among the people. Okay, fearful. Do no work whatever. It is a law for all time, throughout the ages in all your settlements. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. On the 9th day of the month of evening, at evening, from evening to evening, you shall observe this your Sabbath. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, say to the Israelite people, on the 15th day of this 7th month, there shall be the Feast of Booths to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. To last 7 days.
This is Sukkot.
Yeah.
This is Sukkot.
That's right. The first day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. 7 days you shall bring offerings by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. On the 8th day, you shall observe a sacred occasion and bring an offering to fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It is a solemn gathering. You shall not work at your occupations. Those are the set times of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that you shall celebrate as sacred occasions, bringing offerings by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, burnt offerings, meal offerings, sacrifices, and libations on each day, what is proper to it. Apart from the Sabbaths of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and apart from your gifts, and from all your votive offerings, and from all your free will offerings that you give to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, mark on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the yield of your land, you shall observe the festival of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to last 7 days, a complete rest on the first day and a complete rest on the 8th day. On the first day, you shall take the product of hadar trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, 7 days. You shall observe it as a festival of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for 7 days in the year. You shall observe it in the 7th month as a law for all time throughout the ages. You shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I, your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So Moses declared to the Israelites the set times of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, command the Israelite people to bring your clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Aaron shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain of the pact to burn from the evening to morning before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh regularly. It is a law for all time throughout the ages. He shall set up the lamps on the pure lampstand before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to burn regularly. You shall take choice flour and bake of it 12 loaves, 2/10 of a measure for each loaf. Place them on the pure table before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in 2 rows, 6 to a row. With each row, you shall place pure frankincense, which is to be a token offering for the bread, as an offering by fire to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He shall arrange them before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh regularly every Sabbath day. It is a commandment for all time on the part of the Israelites. They shall belong to Aaron and his sons, who shall eat them in the sacred precinct, for they are his as most holy things, from Yud He Vav He, offerings by fire, a dew for all time. There came out among the Israelites a man whose mother was Israelite and whose father was Egyptian. And a fight broke out in the camp between the half Israelite and a certain Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman pronounced the name in blasphemy, and he was brought to Moses. Now his mother's name was Shlomit, daughter of Dibri. Dibri, what is that? Divri, okay. The tribe of Dan. And he was placed in custody until the decision of Yud He Vav He should be made clear to them. And Yud He Vav He spoke to Moses, saying, take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who were within hearing lay their hands upon his head, and let the community leadership stone him. And to the Israelite people, speak thus: anyone who blasphemes God shall bear the guilt. And one who also pronounces the name Yud He Vav He shall be put to death. The community leadership shall stone that person, stranger or citizen, having thus pronounced the name, shall be put to death. If any party kills any human being, that person shall be put to death. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, life for life. If any party maims another person, what was done shall be done in return. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The injury inflicted on a human being shall be inflicted in return. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, but one who kills a human being shall be put to death. You shall have one standard for stranger and citizen alike, for a Yud He Vav He, for I, Yud He Vav He, am your God. Moses spoke thus to the Israelites, and they took the blasphemer outside the camp and pelted him with stones. The Israelites did as Yud He Vav He had commanded Moses.
Okay, we're going to pause there for a moment. Thank you.
Yes, pretty scary stuff. Oh my God.
Yeah, there was a lot in that for sure. So in terms of the eye for eye, tooth for tooth, which is often something that we get very uncomfortable with and think you're going to, in terms of that historical time, that is a counter to what was really happening, which was that if somebody injured somebody or somebody hurt someone's property, that often what would happen in other of the ancient societies is they would kill that person. And so this is to say, an injury like that is not worthy of death. Property destruction is not worthy of death. So it's actually a counter to even harsher punishment. So while it sounds really harsh, and it is, when the rabbis interpreted it, they never read it as, really an eye for an eye. They read it as an appropriate restitution, an appropriate payback, if you will, or response for the harm that was caused. So that's just an important thing to understand, that was actually a repair, if you will, for what was happening in the ancient cultures at that time. So that also said, if you caught it, there was so much in there, but that you are to leave the corners of your land for the strangers. So in this historical moment where we're watching an intentional famine, and there were some rabbis for ceasefire attempting to bring food into Gaza, and they wouldn't let rabbis bring food into Gaza. This really speaks to me as we watch the destruction of the agricultural fields happening all over, and they're not allowing food in. This is really contrary, so profoundly contrary to the teaching. So I'm stuck kind of with grappling with that. We talked about the different holidays. So we had Shabbat. I forgot to unmute and mention Shavuot, and then there was Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. So they're all laid out there in Leviticus. They're in other places in the Torah as well, but that's one of the places you can find where each of these holidays are living in our Torah. So they literally come from our Torah, which is kind of a miraculous thing for us to think about for thousands of years. We have been living these practices in exile, during wars, during times of peace. There's wonderfully sad or poignant stories of these practices being practiced in the Warsaw Ghetto. Certainly in the concentration camps, they hid them and practiced them. So there's a really rich tradition of our people of engaging in beautiful ceremonial and ritual practices to connect us and keep us connected as a people. And so I really enjoyed that part of this parsha, that it brings us back to thousands of years ago. And then there's this is really also a very strong teaching, which is one law, one system of justice for the stranger and citizen alike. And why? Because I am your God. Because in Kiddushim it says, you are to be holy because I am holy. And so that's what this teaching is telling us. Like, you make one law because I am holy, and this is one of the ways that you can be holy. So I see these teachings as continuations from Kiddushim, where we're being taught, you can be holy like me, but here's how you do that. Here's how you enact holiness. And you do that by having one law. You do that by leaving the corners of your land available for other people. So I just wanted to highlight some of those things before we continue to read Behar. But is there any comments or reflections? After we read Behar, at some point during maybe rereading Behar, we'll have some opportunity for you to go into breakout rooms. But just right now, I just want to open it again. Yeah, Neil.
I'll be very brief. It seems like at this moment, there's a lot of struggling. On one hand, there's acts of decency, like leaving the corners of the field, and simultaneously, there's an incredible rigid sense of hierarchy, and the disturbing thing of an authoritarian theme of, even if you say something in blasphemy of God, you're going to be stoned to death, rather than trying to explore what were the social context that gave rise to this level of frustration, and how, from a contemporary standpoint, can restorative justice and other means go about to help a person deal better with their frustrations and emotional reactivity.
Right. Well, and what's interesting, Neil, is that if you look at the Torah, God has God's own outbursts and frustrations. I mean, sends a flood. He's wipes out Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham has to argue with him, and so it's like this evolution, at times evolving, at times devolving, of both the people and of the divine, which is really, to me, what this speaks to, right? Which is that the Torah is written by human beings and a reflection of where they are in that particular moment when they're writing it. And so in this text, that, what you just brought up highlights like the voice in the Torah that is hierarchical and power over, and then the voice of the Torah that's, wait a minute, let's be more caring and loving. And I can almost imagine the debates happening amongst the scribes of the people, right? But wait, we came from Egypt with hierarchy. We see hierarchy all over. It seems to work to create security and community. We need hierarchy. And then you can see other people saying, yeah, but we were strangers. We know we need caring for other people. We weren't cared for. I can almost see the debate. And I don't know about you, but sometimes those two voices live on my shoulders, right? Like, I want to like have some control and power, and then I recognize I don't really want to enact that in the world, or even in my own being, or even in my personal relationships. So the Torah really is that manifestation of the voices that live within us, back then and now. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else?
So maybe we should talk about heterarchy, which would be more kind of a system of anarchy, where sometimes people rise to lead and then they fall back, and sometimes the group is making decisions for better or for worse in either case.
You're reminding me of a story I heard about what's happening in a lot of the encampments, which is that students are creating, when they're going to negotiate with the administrations to disclose and divest, they have different, some of the encampments anyway, have groups of people who are doing the negotiating. So it's not just only 3 or 4 people, but there's different groups. And they're switching off who's going, both so that no one's bearing the pressure and burden of it all, but also to spread the voices and perspectives. And then they come back to the encampment and they get a vote from all the people at the encampment. So it's really a beautiful, I was like really moved by this. It's really a beautiful manifestation of shared power and diffusement of hierarchy. It's really could be a model, right, for how we operate as communities. And so that to me was a really beautiful thing that's speaking to kind of what you're saying here about how we diffuse power and share power. And I think it's hard to do that when you're living in a society that really doesn't have models for that. So the fact that they're able to create that is quite stunning and gives me hope.
I agree. It gives me hope too.
Yeah.
With that, we have to go back to the text.
What?
I said, with that, we have to go back to the text, which is going to turn better, hopefully.
Right, the text turns better here, Behar. So now we're going to hear, this is what's so interesting is, right, we had a lot of that hierarchy, power over dynamic. I also want to say that like the people who wrote this text with this god of hierarchy were mirroring and reflecting they were moving from a time in which they lived within a hierarchical system, right? And now they're trying to create something different. But this God is really also seen as a king, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And so they're creating and uplifting God as the king. And so that's why some of this language mirrors language that you'd hear in monarchies and power over dynamics, because they're grappling with that. And we always, here at Beit Tikkun, we always like to uplift the voice of challenging the imperial power and speaking and using the text as a critique of imperial power. And the people were grappling with it, for sure. Okay, thanks, Austin. I think we can continue.
Can someone else read?
Somebody else want to read? More uplifting.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign to you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, the Sabbath of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce, you, your male and female slaves, the hired and bound laborers who live with you, and your cattle and the beasts in your land may eat all its yield. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to your holding, and each of you shall return to your family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to your holding. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy any from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee. And in selling to you, that person shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. The more such years, the higher the price you pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price. For what is being sold to you is a number of harvests. Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I, Yud-Heh-Vav, am your God. You shall observe my laws and faithfully keep my rules, that you may live upon the land in security. The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. And shall you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year, if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you shall still be eating old grain of that crop. You will be eating the old until the 9th year, until its crops come in. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers resident with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land. If one of your kin is in straits and has to sell part of a holding, the nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what that relative has sold. If any party has no one to be redeemer, but prospers and acquires enough to redeem with, the years since its sale shall be computed, and the difference shall be refunded to the party to whom it was sold, so that the person returns to that holding. If that person lacks sufficient means to recover it, what was sold shall remain with the purchaser until the Jubilee. In the Jubilee year it shall be released, so that the person returns to that holding. If any party sells a dwelling house in a walled city, it may be redeemed until a year has elapsed since its sale. The redemption period shall be a year. If it is not redeemed before a full year has elapsed, the house in the walled city shall pass to the purchaser beyond reclaim throughout the ages. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. But houses in villages that have no encircling walls shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released through the Jubilee. As for the cities of Levi, the houses in the cities it holds, Levi shall forever have the right of redemption. Such property as may be redeemed from Levi, houses sold in the city it holds, shall be released through the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of Levi are its holding among the Israelites. But the enclosed land about its cities cannot be sold, for that is its holding for all time. If your kin, being in straits, come under your authority and are held by you as though resident aliens, let them live by your side. Do not exact advance or accrued interest, but fear your God. Let your kin live by your side as such. Do not lend your money at advance interest, nor give your food at accrued interest. I, Yud-Heh-Vav, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God. If your kin under you continue in straits and must be given over to you, do not subject them to the treatment of a slave. Remaining with you as a hired or bound laborer, they shall serve with you only until the Jubilee year. Then they, along with any children, shall be free of your authority. They shall go back to their family and return to the ancestral holding. For they are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. They may not give themselves over into servitude. You shall not rule over them ruthlessly. You shall fear your God. Such male and female slaves as you may have, It is from the nations round about you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also buy them from among the children of aliens resident among you, or from their families that are among you, whom they begot in your land. These shall become your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property for all time. Such you may treat as slaves. But as for your Israelite kin, no one shall rule ruthlessly over another. If a resident alien among you has prospered, and your kin being in straits comes under that one's authority and is given over to the resident alien among you, or to an offshoot of an alien's family, your kin shall have the right of redemption, even after having been given over. Typically, a brother shall do the redeeming, or an uncle's son shall do the redeeming. Anyone in the family who is of the same flesh shall do the redeeming, or having prospered, your formerly impoverished kin may do the redeeming. The total shall be computed with the purchaser as from the year of being given over to the other until the Jubilee year. The price of sale shall be applied to the number of years, as though it were for a term as a hired laborer under the other's authority. If many years remain, your kin shall pay back for the redemption in proportion to the purchase price. And if few years remain until the Jubilee years, so shall it be computed. Payment shall be made for the redemption according to the years involved. One shall be under the other's authority as a laborer hired by the year. The other shall not rule ruthlessly in your sight. If not redeemed in any of those ways, that person, along with any children, shall go free in the Jubilee year. For it is to me that the Israelites are servants. They are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. I, your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. You shall not make idols for yourselves, or set up for yourselves carved images or pillars, or place figured stones in your land to worship upon, for I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, am your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and venerate my sanctuary, mine, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So that was the other voice of God. It's fascinating to see the two voices so contrasted so strongly. So there's a lot in that parsha, and we can talk about that. But first, I just want to say a couple words, and we're going to go into breakout rooms for a little bit. So the part that always speaks to me is this. This is my land. You are mere sojourner residents on this land, and yet all of us feel connected to land, whether it's Eretz Israel or the land that we currently live on, or maybe places we visited, and other people do too. And so, that becomes really challenging. To me, that becomes really challenging when people feel so connected to land. And it's interesting that it says, don't place figured stones in your land to worship upon. Like, don't make the land the idol of your day. And Martin Buber talked about Zion as a spiritual place, and we often use the word hamakom or Shekhinah, the indwelling presence, the place where God dwells amongst us. And he didn't see that as a land. He saw it as a place of spiritual sustenance, a place of connection and opportunity. And so I guess my question for us today is, there's this conflict, or perhaps conflation, between this Zion of a spiritual place that Buber speaks about and Zion of the land of Eretz Israel. And we're trying to find a way to serve, perhaps what we're trying to do, right, is to find a way to serve divine. So it's a twofold question, one of which is, how do you hold those two concepts of Zion, as a spiritual place and perhaps a physical land space, and how do we serve the divine as we hold those two concepts or larger concepts? So those are the questions. I'll type them. How do we see the contrast or conflation between a spiritual Zion and typing as I'm talking, and a physical place? And as you talk about that, then how do we best serve the divine? Because this text is really asking us, I mean, the divine is kind of demanding us at times, but calling to us to be in of service of the divine. So those are the questions I'm throwing out today. We'll give you 3 to 4 people in a room for about 12 minutes, let's say, given the time. And we'll come back and hear your thoughts. So any insights, questions, things you want to share? There's a few things I want to say, and then we're going to wrap up. But how do you serve the divine, and what do we do with these concepts that we've been talking about? That I threw out there about a spiritual Tzion and a actual physical Tzion. Big
In
questions.
my group, my last word was that we have to share.
Yeah. Sharing is good. It's like kindergarten, right? Go back to kindergarten when we all learned how to share.
Bingo.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I found myself saying there's none of this, of course, is a literal thing, but there is one thing that I think is literal, and that is the reference to the land there, Zion, and that is where the story is started, so to speak, and that is where it takes place. Now we are fast forward in the diaspora, and we can carry, or we are held to carry, the principles in the Torah with us, and that is the spiritual aspect of it. But I think both are true at the same time, and both are part of who we are.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I think one of the questions that Zionists and anti-Zionists throughout our history have grappled with is there's an aspect of living in a land, but then there's another aspect of creating a nation state in that land. And then also the Torah says if you don't live up to the teachings of the Torah, you're going to be kicked off the land, just like I'm kicking off the people of the land now who are not abiding by these values. So it's a complicated mess. And I hope we figure our way through it soon. I wanted to just say something in response, Jacqueline, to your comment earlier about we need to place this in its historical context, and just remind us that what the rabbinic project has always been from when they were exiled to the present day is rereading and re-understanding and transforming and reforming the Torah to the present moment. So the rabbis had to change the sacrifices into something else. So they made the priestly blessing. That's what they transformed the sacrifices to give the priest another job, the priestly blessing. And they then decided that rather than, and this is a small movement towards progression, I would say, from labeling the bodies as problematic to saying if you were a priest with like tie-dyed hands from your work, like blue hands, then you couldn't give the priestly blessing because it would distract the people. They'd be focused on your hands. which could potentially, we could argue, maybe it was a class issue, maybe it really was about being distracted by the blue hands. But then they say, but if you've been in the community for a certain amount of time, 30 days, and you're planning to stay there, then you can, because there's a familiarity. So people are less distracted. They're familiar with your blue hands. They're going to be less distracted. But the rabbinic project, the project of Judaism, has always been to take the Torah and reframe it and reform it and change it and understand it in the present context. And there's been feminist movements about that. There's been queer movements about that. There's been disability movements about that. And so that's, to me, part of the beautiful thing about the Torah is it's really a living document. You turn it and turn it again, and you can always get new stuff from it. Mark, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Part of what we were talking about is climate change and the globalized situation of land and the sacredness of the land, and the land vomiting us out, so to speak, if we're not attentive. And so that brings us in that way of transforming and rethinking what Torah is about. It brings it to a globalized issue, literally. And so what does that mean? And how do we reinstill sacredness, and especially in extractive economic world situations like that?
Right. Beautiful. Yeah, it's as we create wars throughout the world, we're certainly not taking care of the land, because they are the most destructive to the planet, wherever they are, whatever place in the world they exist. The U.S. military industrial complex is I think like the 12th largest country or something. So it's emitting, in terms of its emissions of carbon toxicity. And yeah, thank you for raising that. Thank you, Mark. Kamal.
Thanks a lot. Hi. I had an
Hi.
interesting group. We saw a little bit of the bright side of the sale. Slaves are no good. We understand that, but there was a bright side. So our group recognized first the evolution of and how we got to where we are today. And that evolutionary process and the idea of sales and then creating contract and then creating came up was interesting. Of course, we felt bad about the idea of selling humans as slaves. And then we kind of moved to the environment, how our interaction with a substance that's so old, and then how we could pick out these bad things and then use them today to justify the conquering of a people and the destruction of life. And then how on the other side we could still pull from that same pool, and then we can look like what you do, Rabbi Kat. You look at the bright side a lot. I could see that. You know how to extract certain things and say, hey. And so it really, I believe that after my observation, how we could be so upset at how you could pull from the same document such evil, but yet pull, it really comes down to the individual. How we could take such a document and so many people are taking these documents literally. I can see why. I mean, think about it. 2 times missiles over your head. Okay, it's going to polarize the people that live there because they feel insecure, which fuels fear. So of course, we're religious. We're going to look at the text to see how that can guide us through this hardship. And I believe that's what I got out of my group. It was very good. We came up with, we did a little bit of the environment and the global. Even if I come from the right, I'm still supportive of the idea of global warming because of our very presence, in my opinion, even if it's a catalyst, still contributes to the idea that the environment can change. And so my conclusion was that a deluge or a cataclysm could be man-made. Thanks.
Thank you. Todd.
Hello. What's come to me during this, actually during this morning here is
I think we have bad translations that tend to serve the imperial order, which is upside down. And so I'm going to start thinking about that. And they're just bad. It can't mean, stone to death gay people and there's no redemption. That's just not it. And I feel pretty strongly about that at the moment. So anyway, I wanted to say that, and the blemishes and so forth. That's about tzaddiks. Trying to find people that are worthy of taking the sacrifice, which means part of the whole redemption process. It's got to be what that means. So there you have it. Thanks.
Thank you. So the beautiful thing about Torah is we all get to hear God's voice and create Torah that gives us meaning, and recreate it and redefine it. And so you turn it and turn it and turn it again and again. That's what we do as Jews as we study Torah. So thank you all for studying together today. And we'll go back to our closing. Yeah, definitely. Closing blessings and healing prayer and so forth. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata betochenu brucha aya shechinanu tenet haTorah. Amen.